Halo 3 is a 16-year-old game with an expansive and rich history. The speedrun has evolved and developed over the years, but a lot has been forgotten over time. I want to delve into the depths of the Halo 3 speedrun, uncovering all the strategies that may have been forgotten. I also want to get into the theoretical strats, the forbidden strats, the downright impossible strats, and everything in between. Now this is primarily going to be solo speedrun strats. I will cover a couple for co-op, but I won't be covering anything else in the realm of challenge runs. Challenge runs do have other strats and they're excellent. I suggest you watch the Halo 3 Latter Run My Thesis to see those. Starting off at the top of the iceberg, most of you should recognise most of these first tier of strats. Moose Jump by now is a trick that most of you should be familiar with, but it did come with a few variations and has changed slightly over the years. Its origins are a little hazy, first being demonstrated by Mr. Monopoly in August 2013, when routing for Halo 3 done segmented, which predates Slinky's video by 7 months, which is followed by a flashy Halo 3 done segmented version of the trick, which would follow in 2015, not so much faster as it is stylish. The actual jump itself isn't very different, but does feature a nice lead up. Unfortunately, the original video for this has since been removed, but I still have footage from one of my old previous videos. Danza would very slightly modify the Moose Jump a year later, added a jump at the top so he hits a slide jump for increased distance and clears the gap to the other side a bit easier. Danza's version was the first method used in actual speedruns outside of segmented projects. The current version of the Moose Jump would be established in 2017 by Sasquatch. DC clips in general are a staple of the Halo 3 speedrun. Discovered by Danza shortly after the release of the Master Chief Collection, the speedrun now features multiple throughout the game, the newest application being discovered by Kate Pepsi on Floodgate, skipping the Shadow of Intent cutscene. This discovery has now pushed Floodgate down to being 1 second behind the segmented time set in 2020. Existing for a few years on co-op, it was recently found by Nails that there is a way to leave the third tower on the Covenant and still have its save time on solo. This method of butterflying off the Flood is the second butterfly in the Halo 3 speedrun to save time, and one of the newest tricks in the speedrun, requiring another DC pickup from the Scarab. It leaves you vulnerable to more RNG, but it's nice to see the run evolve 16 years after release. Hammer launches are another example of a trick that is key to a Halo 3 speedrun, being one of the most well-known tricks in the game. It is a common trick with a rich history, which I've covered in one of my previous videos. While not many new hammer launches have been discovered, it is a trick that is paramount to the run.
Oh! Holy shit! I've never gotten that in a run. Let's fucking go, dude! I don't even care that I wasted my
Beach Fight, oddly enough, is a part of the Covenant that's changed a lot over the years. First speedruns, it was typical to clear the beach. It took runners around 60 seconds to clear the fights. Then, for some reason, runners realised it's possible to skip the beach fight just by running straight past. There's no way this can be faster than fighting the beach and taking the Warthog, right? This was later reversed back to the beach fight clear and taking the Warthog. However, this was quite difficult to do fast, so runners found another way on Legendary, hijacking the AA Wraith and driving to the first tower. This was much more consistent and was on par with the pretty fast beach clear. These are pretty much the surface level tricks of the Halo speedrun. Tricks that have been around for over 10 years, and most people who have seen a Halo 3 speedrun have seen these to some extent. Now, early Pelican is a trick that has existed for about 10 years, but it didn't always look the way we see today. For a long time, runners hit early Pelican from the left side of the dam. It didn't become commonplace for the current board to be the other side of the dam until around 2015. This version is actually a bit slower than the current early Pelican, as the Pelican actually sways in the air as it flies in, meaning you have to wait a couple seconds for it to sway to the left side of the dam, allowing for the trick to even work. From the right side, there's no need to wait, you can launch immediately as it flies in. This also means, if you're late to the right side early Pelican, it becomes significantly harder, if not impossible to hit. Speaking of left side strategies, the Scarab board in the Ark used to be from the left side as well. While proving absolutely no time difference, the left side Scarab is far harder, since the Scarab landing animation dips a lot lower on the right side, so the left side being the standard for years would be far harder on runners. It wasn't until I realised this at some point that people switched to the right side of the Scarab. Shifty was a very prominent runner in 2014, and as the Iceberg descends, we'll start to see more and more of his contributions. He often established strategies that would involve the Warthog. This difficult jump, dubbed Shifty Jump, is one of these examples. Requiring good RNG on the drive, followed by a risky jump would land you closer to the Hornets. This trick would also see a few variations by Danza and Sleepless Blue, attempting to make this trick a bit more accessible and not as difficult. Danza's version would utilise a mid-air jump off the DC, and Sleepless Blue's version would change the location of the jump but lose the Warthog. A strategy we don't really see much of today, be it difficulty, lack of a checkpoint if it's missed, or simply forgotten, or irrelevant with the new route. Another Shifty contribution follows immediately after, this elusive and advanced version of the first round skip on Halo, again discovered in 2014. It has only ever been hit once in an individual level record by History 100. It has been hit in other categories, like the Warthog run and segmented projects, another example of a trick that is often opted out of because of its difficulty. This is a segmented strategy of utilising the power drain explosion combined with the force of being knocked by a box to launch into the Covenant elevator, a trick we haven't seen much of elsewhere in the game. Usually boxes are victims of hammer launches. Hit by Sorix in the segmented project. Another segmented strategy of a DC launch from Cortana's corridor straight to the reactor button, requiring the door to be held open by a flood, and a bit of luck involved to actually hit the right angle to land by the button. It might be hard to see what's going on in the Gravemind moment, but if you look carefully, you can see he launches over the chasm and lands almost perfectly by the button. This was hit by Fallen Ultima. Now most of you are probably familiar with Halo CE's 360 on the Maw, but how many of you have seen a 360 at the end of Halo? Not so much a time save strat, and probably a bad idea to actually go for on a run. It's possible to land a 360 into the Dawn, as we see here by Shifty. This gets a nice high spot on the Iceberg, because everyone is familiar with 360s in the Halo franchise, truly a staple of the series. Now, delving slightly below the surface of the Iceberg, I want to show this opening to the Arc by Ball, a small grenade jump that probably doesn't save any time at all, but I don't think anyone is really compared to the regular starts. There's also a high probability that the grenade is required elsewhere. While this is a small strat, I like the simplicity of it, and I wonder if there are any other small route changes like this out there that we are overlooking. It reminds me of shooting Johnson's Warthog closer in Halo, saving about a second. I'm sure most of you are fairly familiar with the skip at the start of Sierra 117 Legendary, but what if I told you there was another? Sliding Ghost is a name that is legendary amongst the Halo 3 community, being one of the best R&D players of all time. His creativity remains unparalleled even today. He discovered a small enemy skip here by the small curve jump on Sierra, skipping the enemies in the cave. It being discovered that this trigger volume is not required to beat the level, and on a 1 second cycle. It's possible to get through without triggering it, meaning that enemies in the cave ahead do not spawn. Not really a time save, as much as a safety strat on Legendary. I also want to point out, this trick is insanely hard, and I've never hit it once, despite trying for a very long time. It's likely easier with the brute shot. Salvo Highway is a level that hasn't really changed since 2007. You get in a Warthog and drive to the end. But what if there was a different way? An idea began floating around the community when Halo 3 done segmented routing started. The idea of ending the level with the double DC launch began to circulate. There was only a couple early concept videos around. Sasquatch had one, which was around the same speed as driving. That video has since been lost. Hiding Tonight had a nice video, but he lost control at the end and died. Danza has another video which shows the concept. Instead, he attempts to use a sideways DC for the second launch. Unfortunately, not getting enough power, the idea is still there. Now ATW, the current Salvo world record holder, decided to ditch the idea of a double DC in favour of a much more manageable single DC launch. Attempting to simplify the trick, but also find a viable means to end the level in a much speedier manner. This is the idea he was going for, which has yet to be landed in a single segment run. Hankless on the Arc was a strategy that the community worked on for a few years. Taking the tank on Legendary was just slow, and the community were taking the Ghost on easy, and were determined to take it on Legendary. But due to the insane amount of enemies between the Dawn and the Spark Door, it didn't seem feasible to survive in a speedrun setting. While attempting to find the strategy, Danza took an alternate approach by trying to optimize the tank section. By hitting a few triggers, he was able to teleport the tanks, saving time but still using the tank. A strategy not used today, but worth a spot in this video for its inventiveness. Discovered by Nagato, it was proven possible to clip through these reactor doors after the reactors explode, but without having to wait for the doors to open themselves. While only saving a few seconds, it has been known about for a few years. It is one of the very few strategies that was omitted from Halo 3 done segmented due to the awful native checkpoint system. A further, more advanced idea has been explored by Bohr and Paradoxic, by clipping from the bottom of the reactor room into Hell's Hallway. It would save far more time from Nagato's version. However, this version is yet to be hit, and is unknown if even possible. Consistent Chasm Launch is a funny strat proposed by Slinky to make the Crow's Nest Chasm Launch viable for single segment runners, and I guess by extension this would apply for the Deathless Challenge. By simply placing a grav lift by the grate, he thought this would help consistency, but honestly, sit down for 10 minutes at this trick and you'll hit it consistently enough anyway. Don't really need the grav lift. I'm not sure the origin of this idea, but it was proposed that a small shortcut leaving the first tower was possible. By driving a mongoose or a warthog up this cliff, it would be possible to skip the regular routes. While I don't think this has really been explored in an optimal setting, it could be faster. Now we start getting deeper into the iceberg. We'll start entering territory of old, forgotten, mysterious, theoretical, or downright impossible strategies. Before hammer launching found its way to Halo 3, barrack skip was already a trick. Discovered by Insetic in 2008, being hit by Malu in a legendary speedrun in 2010, it was made void by History 100. In this effortless display by Malu, he demonstrates the reason I was reluctant to learn the Halo 3 speedrun to begin with. An equipment jump mid-air over the chasm, followed by a small boost of the hammer to land on the other side. This is still relatively viable for challenge runs, since Cowbell makes a great launch pretty risky. A newer segmented DC launch featured by Sorix in his Easy Storm run. This skips straight over the rooftops at the end of the storm, taking you straight to the spot where you can long range the AA gun, currently only ever featured in this segmented run. These elevators are pretty slow. What if there was a way to skip the slow ride and launch straight to the top? Well, Danza had the same idea in 2016. He used as a DC launch the entire way up, skipping the ride, and never activating the elevator at all. This breaks the enemy AI at the top, so they never pathway from the starting location. But that begs the question, how do you get back down? If the elevator is never sent up, can you get back down? After a short while of attempts, Danza manages to work out a way to get down. Using the ledge to slow his velocity once, and the flare to slow it again twice, he's able to descend the elevator shaft without the elevator. Faster? Maybe. Difficult? Extremely. Sliding Ghost also had an idea for the third elevator. He had a video butterflying up the tower on the drones, which would be slightly faster than riding it up. This video no longer exists, but as you can see, the drones do fly up the tower. Another strategy here that, while understood, still hasn't featured in any setting outside of co-op or segmented, yet to be hit in a solo run. Discovered by Sasquatch, and figured out by Danza in co-op. Hit by Paradoxic for the segmented run. The jetpack fight end condition script is launched after wave 1, but before 2 and 3. Therefore, you can satisfy it before wave 3 with precise timing, essentially requiring you to kill 1 brute on easy, 2 on legendary, from the second wave of the first frame possible, and it will skip the final wave. Before the mongoose clip on the storm, runners did what I consider the hardest DC clip in the game. Nagato found it possible to entirely skip the Scarab with the DC clip against this wall. This trick featured in 4 full game world records, and none of them hit it first try. Danza hit it first, Fallen Ultima hit it twice, and Prokill hit it in his first full game world record. By the time Hart came along, he'd already found the mongoose version of this clip, which made the game far more appealing to run full game. We are getting deeper in the iceberg now. We're going to be exploring a lot more mysteries and theoretical strats in Halo 3. First up is Elder God Deload on the Ark. While it has mostly been solved that God Deload is in fact an overload, Halo 3 runners have been bashing their heads against this trick for years. Discovered by Oraxade and Shifty, God Deload was simply an overload that would occur because there were too many entities present in the game at once, activating the cleanup script so the game wouldn't become unstable or potentially crash, which led to what is currently dubbed God Deload. Consistent God Deload took a few years to figure out, until it was mostly solved by ProKiller59 by killing these 4 Marines. This all happened in 2018, and ever since then, the level remained the same. That was until ResDuck posted a video in 2020 with an occurrence that had never been seen before. He went through the spark door, and none of the doors inside were loaded, meaning he was able to continue through without waiting for Spark to open the door or activate the light bridge. Now, a lot of work since then has gone into figuring out this Elder God Deload, but no one really knows for sure. It is believed another overload happened at some point after the first overload. That's about as far as our understanding goes. No one knows how to trigger the second overload, or at what point the overload occurs. The few clips with the Elder God Deload all feature odd behaviour, but attempting to recreate these clips hasn't led us any discovery. For example, in ResDuck's original video, his first few rod shot deloads, and the Phantom doesn't explode. In a normal God Deload, the Phantom will explode and the debris will drop. He has a few enemies spawn, which don't usually spawn in because the Phantom is usually dead far before they have a chance. I had an idea that these few enemies spawning in would trigger the next overload, but as shown by Mocha in this post, that likely isn't the case. This is currently one of Halo 3's biggest speedrun mysteries, as figuring this out would save a large amount of time over current strats. Another theoretical strategy in Halo 3 would be to skip the Hornet flight on the Covenant entirely. The Covenant is a level with a large amount of potential outer bounds, and with the towers not actually being that far from each other. It has been in runners' minds to find a way to skip from one tower straight to the other, but more so in a speedy manner that would save time. In 2018, Danza uploads a video with an elaborate setup featuring several vehicles, proving it's possible. In this instance, it would not save time, but more proving it could be done. He sets up the vehicles in an elaborate method, and uses a deployable cover to clip out the tower, and makes his way to the mongoose he'd set up out of bounds. He would navigate the map out of bounds, and drive to the third tower, skipping the Hornet flight from the beach. The Covenant Scarab fight is one of the most iconic moments in the series, and for a long time, it was a required part of the speedrun, which still mostly is on Legendary. Now, if you aren't familiar with Tower to Tower, I suggest you watch these videos. A similar trick, suggested by the community, was coined Scarab to Scarab, and actually the idea would have been fast for a speedrun. Now the Scarab on the left has a weird animation bug that when you kill it too quickly, will launch you extremely fast and you would likely die. So speedruns will wait for the landing animation to finish before killing it, at least on Legendary. It was proposed as a challenge to use that landing animation bug to launch yourself to the second Scarab and kill it, which was landed by Nagato and Alien Flow. And when compared to the Legendary speedrun method, you can see the difference in speed. Now as cool as this trick is, it's likely too hard for speedruns, and most runs now will just DC clip to skip the Scarabs anyway. The Halo Warthog run is another iconic moment in the series. You have to take the Arbiter in an epic finale and drive to the Dawn. How did Johnson park it there? Anyway, the idea is to follow this long route around the end, but the Dawn is right there. What if there was another way? Now, I'm sure most of you have attempted going the short way around to the end, but it doesn't seem quite possible, right? The road is far too narrow and generally feels impossible to traverse, at least fast. And when you finally do reach the end, it doesn't go anywhere. The Dawn is far too far away and doesn't seem any way to get there. Few ideas have been explored, and Nibre discovered that it's possible to trigger the end cutscene without the player. The two triggers at the end exist, one for the player and one for the vehicle, but the second trigger only exists for vehicles that aren't the Warthog. Demonstrated in this video by Nibre, he shows what that could look like. History 100 also explored this idea. He instead found a way to launch himself onto the Dawn and drop down and trigger the ending himself. And there have been other clips of runners and trickers alike attempting to launch themselves to the Dawn by using the mongoose and the Warthog. A glitch some of you might have encountered, entirely by accident, either in Halo 3 or another game in the series, is known as phase-in. A fantastic video on the history of phase-in was uploaded by Tenacious Trickosity, and I highly suggest you all watch it. Many runners have lost runs to this trick, and I can assure you, none of them were intentional. It's quite a comedic glitch to watch, as the absolute absurdity of the trick and the reaction usually leads to a good Twitch clip. Now I want you guys to keep this trick in the back of your mind. We will come back to it later. Reaching almost the bottom of the iceberg now. This tier is almost entirely dedicated to purely cursed strats. Strats that are so ridiculous, downright impossible, or just an idea that will likely never see an application, but worth mentioning and talking about. Remember how I said Salvo is a level that hasn't changed since 2007? That's because the ideas people are coming up with, or the things people are having happen, are utterly absurd and borderline impossible to attempt to reproduce. Debit Card found a strategy of having this grunt stick the Warthog and launch himself over the dam. This only works on easy, and I can't speak for the rest of the community, but this looks absolutely insane to attempt to work into an IL that is already insanely optimized. Anyone want to try? Leapless Blue did have a similar idea, but instead he drives over the dam, which looks a bit more manageable. Which leads us onto the next strategy, which I dubbed the Dark Bump, which is also on Salvo. So it turns out these shield doors are vulnerable to any environmental damage, not just grenades, taking just the right amount of damage in the Warthog. I once approached the shield door at the correct angle, at the correct speed, took the correct amount of damage for my hubcap to fly off and destroy the shield door. Now this has happened a couple times to other runners, entirely by accident. Is it faster? Perhaps. Is it consistent? I wouldn't think so. Now imagine a not too distant future where we see Salvo with debit card to launch, the Dark Bump, and some kind of BC ending. That would be impressive. An odd mystery dating back to 2007 on the level Halo. Sometimes this door inside the spire will be open early, but no one has ever really figured out what causes it. Danza put some work into Halo and found a way to get the first door open, which is by killing Johnson outside in such a way that when you progress the level, he teleports inside and opens the door. But the second door has proved much more mysterious, and having both doors open early has happened approximately 3 to 4 times over the game's recorded history, as far as we are aware. The second door being open early is a relatively common occurrence, but nobody really knows what the cause of it is. We will see the return of Shifty, exploring alternative launch methods and attempting to find a backup to the reactor room launch on Cortana. Shifty would find something interesting. Jumping off this scripted reactor explosion, he would attempt a few times to launch across the reactor room. Unfortunately, never landing the idea. It is a super cool concept, and I love the creativity of something like this. Delving deeper and deeper into the iceberg. Liftless is a strategy that most runners have reset to. What if I showed you the most cursed strat of all time? Mr. Monopoly, one day, decided to see if he could make it more consistent, uploading a video of hitting his own version of Liftless by ramming the hog head-on into the barrier, launching himself across multiple times in a row.
Something in the crater, ma'am. Something beneath the storm. Something in the crater, ma'am. Something beneath the storm.
Hawk would later do his own version of this by hitting the right side barriers. In the early days of DC clips, people were trying to find ways to skip large parts of levels. Before we had the scripts available and were able to check trigger volumes, people just clipped wherever possible, even if it didn't save time. Danza was adamant to skip the Scarabs and the Covenant, but his setup is the most cursed setup of all time. Wanting to carry an invincibility over to the clip spot, this is what he did. Before the discovery of the fast Citadel clip, the during routine of Halo 3 Unsegmented, Danza had the idea of skipping the Warthog run to the Hornets at the end of the Covenants, and the Hornets themselves, who would spend a few days trying to DC launch to these Banshees that spawn in attempts to hijack them, and after a very close call, he knew it was possible.
Troops are mobilizing everything they've got.
Returning a few days later, he would land what I consider one of the coolest looking strats in the game, was able to skip the entire section and fly straight to the Scarabs. Unfortunately, this would later be routed out in favour of the Citadel clip. The second instance of a DC launch to a Banshee was attempted by multiple runners. Sleepless Blue came extremely close to this, and the Banshee being far faster than the Hornets, this trick would save a lot of time over the normal flight route by the Hornets. Mint Blitz has landed this, but with skull modifiers enabled, which aren't allowed in regular speedrun seconds. Now this idea or concept I don't think we will ever see any real application of, but I wanted to include it anyway. But as you can see on this map, the Warthog run is actually pretty close to the start. By removing the death barriers and altering the jump height, it was found it's actually possible to trigger the Warthog run at the very start of the level. However, with no feasible or viable way to do this without modding, it's very likely this will never be used in runs. I just thought it was interesting, unless someone finds a way to carry over a DC from Cortana. Pressure launches in Halo 3 are very few and far between, at least with applications that might impact the speedrun, and even then, most of the methods have better tricks in their place, such as the elevated pressure launch on Crow's Nest. The vertical DC launch is far easier to hit. If you're curious how to pressure launch, this post sums it up pretty well. Reaching the final tier of the Iceberg, we arrive at Halo 3's biggest mysteries, the Holy Grails, the tricks that live on as legendary amongst the community. First up in this category is Shifty's launch on Halo. The idea he had, and spent many hours on, was using this falling debris that hits the platform to launch himself either over the mountain or some kind of redirect into the Dawn, end the level far earlier than intended. It was never explored using Nibre's idea of simply launching the vehicle into the end trigger, since it wasn't known about then, but this idea was legendary, and would be one of Halo 3's most outrageous tricks, if it was ever possible. Before we DC clipped on the Storm to skip the Scarab, Sliding Ghost had an idea. Sliding Ghost hijacked the AA Wraith in the second lake bed. He positioned himself right where the troop hog is usually parked. Somehow, when the Scarab landed in the lake bed, he positioned himself in such a way that it would launch him and cause an immense amount of lag. Now, due to the hardware limitations of the 360, this would then cause the Scarab to deload, the game thinking it has been defeated and the player being able to continue the level. No footage of this exists anymore, but the setup would look something like this. The absolute holy grail of Halo 3 speedruns currently is the Spire fight skip. In Halo 3, on the final level, you have to spend a few minutes fighting waves of flood. Wait for the door to open, and then you can progress inside. Danza found it possible to load the interior of the Spire by standing in this spot. meaning somehow, if you got inside, you could carry on with the level. Now currently, no known method to get inside exists. There is no DC on the level, and no known method to carry over equipment between levels, so you can't bring one from Cortana. A theory existed of phasing under the door, and then somehow getting back up on the other side, but no one has ever phased out once, even by accident. Phasing requires an obstructed melee, and there doesn't appear to be anywhere near the door when this is even possible. So unfortunately, this idea currently seems impossible, but it would be the biggest time save Halo 3 would probably ever see. Cortana is a level that I feel has a lot of potential that we are yet to discover. Danza has a few clips on the level from routing for Halo 3 done segmented. One of the best ideas he had was this DC clip right here, clipping by the Crash Pelican. A simple clip, but the effect would have been monumental. No enemy spawn for the rest of the level. It also skips every Cortana and Gravemind moments. However, nothing happens after you break Cortana stasis. At least that's what Danza thought. By going back through the level to hit the first trigger you missed, then going back to Cortana stasis, this happened.
You found me. There's 2 of us in here now, remember?
As soon as you enter the area that checks the condition, it is met immediately. This trick actually does work on co-op, and it's nice to see the level without any Gravemind moments slowing you down. I feel like there is a lot of potential for DC clips on Cortana. Danza had a few ideas, like this one, clipped from the Hell Room straight to the Reactor Room. A bonus entry here, a speedrunner most people probably haven't ever heard of,
Wahis.
which roughly translates to the bad guy, from Finland, was around in the high-speed Halo days. Strictly sticking to lasso speedruns, which is legendary or skulls on, being the first person in the world to complete every individual level of legendary or skulls on. I could do an entire video on this guy. He was years ahead of his time. In fact, he still holds lasso records to this day, despite the fact they were set over 13 years ago. A few have only just been beaten recently with the abundance of new strats that have been developed over the years. Now, not only was he a lasso speedrunning expert, he also held every single high score record across every single level in the campaign, holding the record at a phenomenal 3 million score across the entire campaign, once again being set over 13 years ago. These all been set on the original 360 version of the game. Now, it's hard to compare or compete since the scoring system was overhauled on the Master Chief Collection, but this guy was the reason I started a speedrun to begin with. It took me approximately 2 years to beat one of his records by 2 seconds. This is the Halo 3 speedrun Iceberg. I likely missed a few things, but I had fun making this. There are other glitches that exist, such as this weird teleport in Halo, but these sort of glitches didn't really fit anywhere on the Iceberg. Anyway, thanks for watching.